All right, what's up, everyone? Welcome back to the NAV Lab. Today we have our guest, Megan Aller. Megan, thank you for coming on the podcast. Megan is what I call the most valuable person to real estate agents in the Denver metro area. She's a sales executive and data analyst.
Data analyst.
Yeah,
You got it.
analyzer is not the word. I don't know why I thought that, but thank you for coming on.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah, how was your morning? How was the drive over?
It was good. So I had a crazy sleep schedule last night. So I went to bed at like 7 o'clock last night. I was super tired.
Okay.
And I woke up at 11:58 thinking it was 4 o'clock in the morning. And I was just up. Like when I'm up, and I can't go back to sleep. So I got up in the middle of the night. Dune 2 was on. It was on Amazon Prime. So I watched Dune 2.
Great movie.
Then, awesome movie. I was sad that I didn't get to see it in the theaters, but then finally fell back asleep around about 4 o'clock this morning, and then woke up at 6.
Okay.
And then I kind of hung around, drank my coffee, had a coffee meeting this morning, and then it's on to this.
Yeah. Awesome. So, funny story is, I think I was just telling you, I just got back from Australia. With my jet lag, I'm on the exact same schedule. Been waking up at midnight on the dot, wide awake, stay awake for like 4 hours, fall asleep for like 2 more, and then force myself to get up for the day.
It's brutal.
I think I did the exact schedule as you last night, and it's horrible. My wife, same way. She is not happy about jet lag.
And I never get jet lag going there. It's always coming back.
And you've been traveling some too, so.
A little bit. Not
maybe
much, though.
that's why.
I've only been off by about 2 hours, though.
Okay.
So, but it was in Florida, and it was for a work trip, and they always want to have breakfast at like 7 a.m., which is like 5 a.m. our time. And I usually get up at 4 o'clock in the morning to start work early so I can get some stuff knocked out before the kids wake up. But, I mean, even that's early, because I was like getting up at like 3 o'clock in the morning to get ready for breakfast for these business meetings.
Yeah. Wow.
So, it was brutal. It was brutal.
At least you got to watch a good movie.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. Well, I thought I'm on my second cup of coffee. If you need some, let me know.
I've had enough. I will get to my next appointment before I realized I forgot my car if I have any more caffeine.
Okay.
So no more caffeine.
Well, I'll jump right into it. I guess first of all, tell us kind of what you do, and I guess maybe start with where you're from and how you got there.
Yeah. So I'm actually a 4th generation Colorado native. So I grew up here. I can't imagine living anyplace else. And if I ever get kicked out of the state, I have no idea where I'd go. But grew up here up in Arvada. Went to University of Northern Colorado. I got 3 degrees, analytical chemistry, microeconomics, and mathematics. And it turns out those are all horribly boring topics to study and to go out and get job prospects in. And I was pretty much done with school by the time that I finished up with my degrees. I was like, I really don't feel the need to go into this. I know I'm not going to be doing this long term. So I tried to think of what was the opposite of doing any of that. And so I actually went to be a flight attendant for 3 years. I was like, I'm single, I'm not married, I don't have a mortgage, I don't have a car payment. Like, I just want to go and travel. So I just went and traveled for about 3 years. And then when my ex-husband and I got engaged, we said, it's time to come together. And he was traveling 75% of the time for his job. So I said, it's time to come together. And I was like, well, I really want to be in a commission-dependent sales position because I know that I can outwork just about anybody. And so with my background, I thought medical or pharmaceutical sales would have been the best fit for me in terms of a sales position. But no one would even look at you until you had at least 2 years of sales experience. So I was kind of dead in the water when I was in my mid-20s trying to figure that out. The best man in our wedding happened to be a copywriter for the multiple listing service, the real property database where all real estate agents come and list their properties in Metro Denver. It was then called Metro List. He was a copywriter for them, and he said, hey, we need an account manager. And I was like, well, okay, tell me about it. Like, what do I do? And so he told me a little bit about it, and I was like, well, it's salesy enough that I can use it for a resume. So I went and interviewed for the position knowing nothing about real estate, knowing nothing about multiple listing services, knowing nothing about contracts, and being terrified of public speaking. And I get put into a position where I have to go out and teach agents how to use the MLS database. So over the course of 3 years that I was working there, I ended up teaching thousands of agents how to use an MLS system. And we were transforming the system from a DOS-based prompt dial-up system into a Java platform and then ultimately into .NET framework. Well, what was interesting about that was we were doing greenfield development. And so we were developing all of our own MLS systems and searches. The problem was the iPhone came out in 2007, and the way that people search MLS databases and the operating systems in which they use completely made the system obsolete within like a year of that. And so they learned through the process of that I had a big background in analytics. And so I went through and I actually transitioned over to a development team. And on their development team, I helped them redo all of their stats and their analytics so that agents have good numbers to share with clients about how the market is performing. This was 2009. And then in 2009, I was like, okay, I've done this enough. It's time to move into a sales position. So I was actually headhunted by another title company, and they hired me in, and this was 2010. And I don't know if you had your license in 2010 or not, but the market was not good. And I would have never, had I known that it was the worst real estate market we had ever seen during the Great Recession, I probably wouldn't have accepted a commission-based dependent sales position in that market. But I went through and I was given what were called all of the accounts of opportunity. That was basically all of the accounts that no one was calling on. And so I had to go in, develop relationships from scratch, and figure out how to do that. The hard thing about working in title insurance is that we're seen as a highly commoditized industry. It's really hard to differentiate services from one company to the next. Yeah. We all kind of do the same thing, so it's all based on relationship and how many people you can make in connections. The other thing that we struggle with as a sales rep in title insurance is that everyone wants to put the emphasis on their closer. They're like, well, I interact with my closer more than I do my sales rep, and so, who are your closers? And I was like, well, wait a minute. As your salesperson, they're earning commission off of every transaction. Your salesperson should be just as important as your closer is in the transaction. So what can I do to be as important to your transaction as being part of your closing team? And so with my background in analytics, I started to create reports based on how the market was performing. And I've been building that now steadily over about a 15-year period. And I've got about a 25-year baseline of how Metro Denver has performed overall. And what started out as like a 10-page report is now turned into about 1,200 pages of content that I publish on a quarterly basis based off of how the market is performing to help agents better advise their buyers and sellers on how to make offers, and if the market's going to be hot or not, if they're going to be in multiple offers, or if they can ask for concessions. And so I track and trend all of that through a massive database system that I've created, and I now have over 19,500 subscribers to that database.
Yep. And there you have it, folks. That's how you become the most valuable person to real estate agents in Denver Metro. Oh my gosh, what an origin story.
Yeah.
And I can speak to the value that you do provide, right? Kind of the road to get there makes sense now. Mm-hmm. I didn't know you were a flight attendant. That's pretty cool.
Yep, flight attendant for 3 years. Hardest job I've ever had.
Okay.
People are awful on airplanes.
Oh, I know. And I'm going to change the subject for 2 seconds. On my way to Australia, we hit some turbulence, and there was a flight attendant who was probably like in her 60s, right?
Oh.
And she went airborne.
Oh,
and,
no.
like, smacked her head on one of the seats in the aisle. And everyone sat down, like, the plane is, like, really shaking. And she's down for, like, a few seconds.
Oh.
And I'm like, no one's getting up. And I'm on the window, and I tell my wife, like, hey, like, I'm going to get up and go check on her. And then finally she, like, kind of gets up, and she's bleeding. And, like,
oh, no.
It was horrible. Yeah, it felt really bad. And we're in the last, like, 20 minutes of the flight too.
Oh gosh,
it was really bad. Yeah, that was like the most traumatic thing I think I've ever seen on a flight. Like,
what do you do?
We thought she was like dead.
Oh,
no.
It was
bad. She was just out.
Holy cow!
I couldn't really see her because I don't know, but yeah.
That's intense.
Back on subject. So you told us how you got there, right, and kind of what you do. Tell us about the market.
Yeah. So, God, I get this question all the time, and people reach out to me and they're like, Megan, how's the market? And it's my friends, it's real estate agents, it's lenders. They all want to know what I'm seeing in the marketplace right now. And there's no one size fits all answer to it. Mm-hmm. And my first question to them is, well, where are you located? And what price point are you in? Because that's going to dictate how your home sells right now. And the best thing that I can say about the market right now as a whole is that it's incredibly fickle. There are certain spots in the market that are incredibly hot where we're seeing significant multiple offers. There are other areas that are just sitting and nothing is happening. And so it's so important right now as a real estate professional and as a buyer or seller that you're working with a real estate professional that knows micro markets, because it can change from zip code to zip code, from subdivision to subdivision, and even from one street to the next. And so it's important that you're working with somebody that knows what's happening in the market right now. But places that are hot right now where we're seeing insane multiple offers, places like Old Town Arvada. Lakewood also tends to be a hot spot. South suburban metro Denver, getting down into Lakewood and Littleton and Morrison are all hot. Up by Anschutz Medical Center is also very hot. Central Park and what is the subdivision right north of Central Park? It is Northfield. It's hot. Montbello is hot. But then if you go one or two zip codes over to Aurora, as you get out into the Aurora Highlands just south of the airport, it's a buyer's market. And it's in areas where there's significant new construction. A lot of those lenders have pre-bought down those interest rates down to 4.99%. So when you're competing at the same price as residential resale with a 7% interest rate, you don't look as appealing as new construction does. And so a lot of those buyers are trending towards new construction if they're looking in those areas. Broomfield is a cooler spot. Getting down into Castle Rock, we're up to like 88 days on market right now. Again, lots of new construction that's happening out there. But there's also been this real big trend of cooling in central Denver core neighborhoods that hasn't been the case from 2013 through 2019, where they were just on fire and everyone was snapping up those properties. And it's a combination of affordability, but then also a lot of negative press around the homeless population and crime rates going up within central Denver, where people are moving out to the western suburbs right now. Yeah. And so it really depends on the location that you're working in, and that you as a buyer's agent are having conversations with listing agents to get a temperature gauge as to what's happening right now in their market, or if they're in multiple offers or if they're not. And if they're in multiple offers, what kind of offers are they getting? The most offers that I've heard on a home most recently was a home that was $465,000, had 37 offers on it. But then I'm talking to listing agents that have listings that are down in Castle Rock at $1 million, and they're like, I had 2 people come through my open house. What gives? And so it just depends on the market. Some markets are really hot and other markets are not. And so it just, you have to know what's happening in your micro market right now.
Yeah, it's very interesting what I tell my buyers. It's almost verbatim what you said just now. And you can tell that I read your reports and I tailor the way I speak based on what you say. But I tell my buyers, hey, every market is different street to street, because you can have, one thing happening here, and then the next street over is a gated community with double the home value. And it's the same with, like, I don't know. It's just funny that I agree with you 100% on everything there, and I'm seeing the same thing out there. It seems like all my buyers are in areas that are very hot right now. I think I was telling you earlier, just anecdotally, showed a house sort of close to Wash Park over the weekend, listed for $990, 3-bed, 2-bath. And when I called the agent later that day, so this was on Friday, they already had 10 offers.
Wow.
I don't really know. I don't know yet how many they ended up with. I would like to find out to see. It does seem like if it is competitive, most people are getting in pretty quickly. So I don't know if they got more over the weekend. And then showed another buyer, home listed at $500K. And when I called the agent, they also had 10 offers, and this is in Littleton. And I would say, I ran comps. They priced it very low, and the home had never been updated. It was like walking into a time machine. And I had thought, and kind of leading into my next question, with rates jumping like they did over the past couple of weeks, with the Fed announcing they were not going to do rate cuts like they planned throughout the year, that they are going to now cut rates in the fall. Interest rates went up a lot, and I thought things might slow down a little bit, and I was surprised when they didn't, because typically, and maybe correct me if I'm wrong here, especially that price range around $500-600K, when rates change significantly unfortunately, those are the people that are most affected. This is just my opinion. I don't know if I'm backing this up with any data at all. So maybe can I get your opinion on that?
Yeah. So our most interest rate sensitive category right now are those homes between 800 to 999,000.
I was wrong. Yeah. Okay.
And so it's about 80 to 85% of them require financing to get into a home. So they're typically the people that we end up seeing that market slows down in that price range, right on the top side of jumbo rates. And so the buyers that are down at lower price points right now tend to be more first-time home buyers, more investors. We're seeing more cash transactions that are happening down there. And so the first-time home buyers didn't experience the 2 to 3% interest rate game. So they're not accustomed to seeing that. They don't know what they've missed out on.
Right. Okay.
We're also seeing a lot of people that are in a position where they have to move and not necessarily want to move. And so what I'm seeing right now is a lot of birth, death, divorce, loss, or change of a job, which aren't necessarily happy transactions, but they're people that are in a position that have to move. And so they're really forced, their hands are forced, where they have to make a purchase now, and they don't really want to. They don't want to give up their 2 to 3% interest rate. And so our market overall is a lot smaller than what it was from 2020 through 2022. Yeah. But they're in a position where they have to make a move, and so they're stuck with the rates that they are. We're seeing a lot of people that are bidding over asking price to finance in a rate buy down where they can get a 2-1 buy down or a 1 buy down so that they can enjoy a lower interest rate for a shorter period of time and still go through and refinance in a couple of years if and when rates do come down. Yeah. And so it was so funny when the Fed came out earlier this year and said that they were going to go through and make 3 rate cuts at the beginning of the year, and I saw every realtor and every lender celebrating and splashing that all over social media, and I was like, whoa, everyone's leaving out the caveat, and that caveat is that only if inflation is under control.
Right.
And inflation is not under control. Powell wanted it too, so they're holding it higher for longer. So you really need to be watching your inflation reports, your core inflation, your CPI or CPE numbers, and watching what's happening with those, because consumer spending is still strong. Unemployment is still historically low. It's as low as it was back in 1969, sitting at 3.9%. And so the overall economy is still strong. People are still spending money like they run drug cartels. Like, we haven't curtailed to what's been happening in the market, so inflation isn't under control yet. And so the Fed is not going to cut rates until inflation is at 2% and holding. And right now we're sitting about 3.5%. And so we're almost there. We've definitely made some major strides, but Powell is really hell-bent on keeping them higher for longer.
Yeah, I agree with you 100%. So speaking of rates going higher, when rates, so what was it, 2 years ago, when rates really jumped up significantly, leading into the fall, the market basically stopped, right? Remember that? It was just like, holy crap, what's happening?
Yeah, when rates started to go up, it acted like a catalyst in the market, and it pushed a bunch of buyers off the fence just to get into something. And then they rose to a certain point where it was like, whoa, like I just lost out on so much purchasing power. And then it slowed to a stop. And the fourth quarter of 2022 was just dreadfully slow, as was the fourth quarter of 2023.
Yep. So that leads into my next question. Our markets, in my opinion, I think this is a correct opinion though, has always been very seasonal. And we're seeing that seasonality right now, even though rates are high. Do you think that rates drop? I mean, in one day, I think they increased from the 3/4 to almost a point, right, in one day. And this was last week. If they hold that high, do you think it's going to slow down things, or do you think just the seasonality is going to keep going for the next couple months at least?
So, I think the market is going to remain its strongest. Right now, it's typically right after Easter up until about the middle of May when kids start to get out of school. That's when the market's strongest. And our market is proving not to be as strong this year as it was last year. As we start to get closer to summer months in June and July, specifically after Independence Day weekend, we really know to pull back in the marketplace, or if someone's going to make a move, they want to do it during the premium summer months while kids are out of school so that it causes the least amount of disruption to kids in school. Now, as we get into the fourth quarter, if we see rates drop, we could see a pop of activity that ends up happening at that point. But again, that's only if inflation is under control at that point.
Yeah. Brian Buffini big name in real estate coaching. I saw a video the other day. He thinks that 70% of your business this year as an agent will be done in the fourth quarter.
In the fourth quarter?
In the fourth quarter, that was his prediction. So who knows? I think it was based on the rates in election and things like that.
If that happens, it's such a big if.
I know. I couldn't imagine. It's a big if, right?
It's a big if.
Pretty bold to say that. But
I think that's a really bold statement. I don't know that I agree with it.
And I think he was talking about nationwide, obviously, not in our market, which I always caveat.
Well, and when the Fed came out and said they were going to make rate cuts, we're not talking about going back down to the 2s or 3s.
Right.
We're talking about going down 1 point or 3/4 of a point. And so that brings us back into the low 6s. Is that enough to really drive a market and to push people out into the marketplace? Not necessarily. I don't think so. You'd be better doing a rate buy down at this point, getting into the market now and enjoying some of the appreciation that we're already gaining this year.
At what point do we get to the people who did 1-year buy downs, 2-1 buy downs? Those rates are up and rates didn't drop like they were expecting. That's something I've been thinking a lot about lately. Do those people sell? Do they?
Well, so when you do a rate buy down, you have to qualify at the higher rate.
At the higher rate.
Yeah, so you have to qualify at the higher rate so they're not at risk of not being able to afford that house unless they go through a life-changing circumstance that forces them to be in a position where they have to sell their house.
Okay, so you don't really, you're not taking that into account that could change things.
No.
Okay.
I don't think it's going to be a big shift.
Okay. It seems like everyone I talk to or I see talking about doing a 2-1 or something like that, it's like, yeah, you'll do a 2-1, you'll refinance over that 2 years, you'll get a better rate. So all those buyers kind of in their mind are really banking on doing that. And if that doesn't happen, well, I mean, it's bad news. I mean,
yeah, they're going to go up to that higher rate.
They should be able to pay for it, yes. But who knows who buys a car, or like, you know, they get more bills, or we have the highest credit card debt in history right now with the highest rates on that credit card debt. So I wonder how much that will impact people. Maybe not at all, but yeah, something that I've thought about a little bit recently. Cool. So speaking of the market, what is your forecast for the future? I was telling you this earlier. A few years ago, I remember you speaking about your 7-year forecast and how you were predicting home values to continue to go up. And this may be more than 2 years ago, honestly. This may be like the first time I ever heard you speak was probably like 7 years ago.
Has it really been that long?
Yeah, I think so.
That's wild.
Jessica Uphoff's office. Do you remember that?
Yeah.
You were still at Land Title back then. Yeah, it's been a while.
That's crazy. So I think, it's been really interesting to go through different cycles in real estate. And I've been in it for 15 years, tracking it for 20. And there was a market cycle that started when I started tracking real estate that ran from about 2020 or 2003 up until the market recession in 2007, 2008. Then 2008 through 2012 was an extreme buyer's market. Then we came out of the recession and the market just dropped. It was crazy to see how the market picked up. But 2013 through 2019, we had this really perfect cycle that you could basically set your watch to. And then the pandemic rolled around in 2020, threw a wrench into everything. The first half of the year was slow because you literally couldn't show a home unless you put it under contract first. And then the second half of the year came back really strong. And then interest rates dropped into the 2s and 3s, fueling the market of 2021 and 2022. Then in 2022, about halfway through the year, interest rates ended up shooting up to 6.5–7%. And by the time that we got into 2023, we were looking at rates that were almost 8% as we got into May of last year. And so when I look back on previous real estate cycles, this could be a whole new real estate cycle that we're starting out with right now, where the market's really spotty and my baselines don't line up anymore. And so I think that this is the beginning, that the end of 2022 is the beginning of a new real estate cycle for us, where the market overall is a lot smaller than what we've experienced in the past, because so many people did lock into their 2 and 3% interest rates, and they're saying, you know what, I'm not going to move into a smaller house for more money. Right. I'm just going to stay put and renovate where I am right now. It's kind of interesting because I went through a divorce about 3 years ago, and I was contemplating holding on to my house or not. And I've got significantly more house less than what I need. But when I started looking at what I could afford to move into, it was like a super duper fixer upper at like half the price. And I was only cutting my mortgage payment by like $2,000 a month. Yeah. And so I just started to think, well, you know what, this market isn't for forever. This is just a temporary market, and the market's going to pick back up again. On average, we push through about 60,000 closed transactions a year when we get into a more normalized market. And I expect that to happen again in the next couple of years as rates tend to stabilize, that people will become accustomed to the higher interest rate market. But it has tampered appreciation. And so from 2013 through 2019, we were experiencing anywhere between 8 to 12% appreciation year over year. Then during the pandemic years, we were up to like 15 to 20% year over year, where it was just going up so rapidly. And that's why everybody's taxes went up so high as we went through this last appraisal cycle. Now, as of last year, average home prices only went up by about 2%. A normalized rate of appreciation is about 4%. And right now, if we look at year over year, we're sitting at about 5% year over year for the same month 1 year ago. Now, we'll give some of that back as we go into June, July, and August, as we go through a retraction cycle, and prices tend to soften as inventory rises and prices fall back, and there are more choices and more negotiations that happen in the later part of the summer months. And so I think that we're probably going to land around that 3 to 5% range again this year. And I think that we're going to continue to land around that 3 to 5% range year over year until we start to see a bigger dip in interest rates, if that happens and we get inflation under control.
Okay. Looking at it supply and demand wise, I mean, we still have way less inventory than we need though, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, we have, so an average or a normal amount of inventory here in Metro Denver is somewhere between 3 to 3.5 months of inventory. Right now we're sitting at about 1.1 months worth of overall inventory. So we're far short of the amount of inventory that we need to offset demand, but we also have a significant amount of new construction that's coming in that's not factored into that number. Okay. But builders are restricting supply, and they're only releasing a few lots each year because they don't want to go through the same economic recession that we did back in the Great Recession from 2008 through 2012, where they were just lost with all of these homes that were on the market that they pre-built up that they were willing to sell. And so builders are being smarter about restricting the growth right now and not flooding the homes with markets.
Okay. And that's
markets with homes.
That's about 30,000 listings. Is that what that is?
So no, I honestly don't know how many new construction homes are out there.
Not new construction, like a balanced market.
A balanced market. So a balanced market would occur if we had a 6-month supply of inventory, which would feel super high for us here in Metro Denver. And so we would need to have around 29,000 total homes available for sale based off of demand from the last couple of weeks in order to offset demand. And so for us to feel like a more normalized market here in Denver, we'd need to be closer to around 15 to 16,000. Right now we have just over 6,000 homes available for sale.
Yep. Cool. My guess was 30,000, so
yeah,
I was close.
You were there. You got it.
Because
you said 30, I said 29. Yeah. We're close enough.
It's even better, right?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So a couple other questions I want to ask you. 3 questions. What advice are you giving sellers? What advice are you giving buyers? And what advice are you giving agents right now?
Yeah. So for sellers, buyers don't want projects. They want turnkey, renovated, updated properties right now. And those properties that are renovated and turnkey and ready to go that don't require projects are going under contract with multiple offers in the first weekend. However, if you are a fixer-upper, you are sitting on the market longer than that. It's like a tale of two markets right now. You're either perfect and turnkey and ready to go, great photography, great listing presentations, listed in the MLS, look beautiful, have great online presence. Those are going under contract very quickly. But those that don't are sitting on the market for 30 to 60 days, and they're not selling for top asking price. Time on market is a real deal killer, and you really have 1 or 2 weekends to make a good impression in this market to get it under contract at a good price. Now for buyers, if you're not in a position where you can be competitive in the marketplace right now, wait for the feeding frenzy to die down and look at homes that have been on the market for 14 to 21 days. If you're not in a position where you can be in a multiple offer situation where you can bid 2 or 3% over asking price. Okay. Now, again, if you're a buyer, I would encourage you, don't focus on the rate, focus on what your monthly payment's going to be. because we can't get stuck on the rate conversation, especially if you're a first-time home buyer. A first-time home buyer, this is not your forever home. This is just your stepping stone. And keep in mind that when you're renting, 100% of that rent is interest. You're not getting any return on your investment at that point. And so while it may not be your dream home, your job is to get into a home so that you can start building equity on that. Maybe buy a home that could turn into a great rental property down the road so that you have the opportunity to build wealth. Now, for agents, what I'm encouraging them to do is to look for those buyers and sellers that are having life-changing circumstances right now. And so that's where we're driving the majority of our transactions. And I mentioned it a little bit earlier in the podcast, but it's those that are having birth, death, divorce, loss, or change of a job are the ones that are buying and selling real estate right now, or first-time home buyers. And so it's important that you're really focusing in on those areas right now and staying in tune with your database. It's more important right now that you're in tune with your sphere of influence for those people that are going through those life-changing circumstances so that you can help and guide them through that. I will tell you, I am having divorce conversations right now on a daily basis and probate and death conversations on a daily basis right now. And so it's important that you guys are in tune with those and that you're actually harnessing those leads and can guide those buyers and sellers through those types of transactions. They're not the happiest transactions to go through and work with, but they're the people that need our help right now.
Yeah. I mean, anecdotally, a lot of my clients are going through divorce right now. It's interesting to think about, and like, yeah, I don't know, I'm not going to get into it, but it seems a lot of people are going through what I would call economic hardship right now. And I don't know if that's fueling those things a little bit, but it seems to be one of the first things that comes up in my conversations, and not something that I think about a lot of, like, you know, if we're going through a recession, I'm assuming a lot of people will have to sell their house, and that's the economic hardship piece. And as we get into more of a recession, which we very could, is a lot of my business going to come from people in those situations. And as an agent, it sucks to think about things like that a lot, and like that's where your business is going to come from, because all those things you mentioned, besides being a first-time home buyer, not something positive, you know. So it's interesting. Okay, cool. You know, I take a lot from your advice and what you say, and in a lot of my conversations, I try to back it up with the data and things that you bring, which is awesome. I do have another question for you, which has been a very hot topic in the real estate industry right now, and that's the NAR settlement that's coming this summer. If people listening are not familiar, there is a settlement happening between the National Association of Realtors and a plaintiff that is basically going to say that the MLS or any MLS can no longer advertise buyers agents commissions. And that's really the biggest change. Now, there are going to be a lot more changes internally within companies and within your local MLS with rules and regulations around this, I'm sure. But very high level, how do you think it's going to affect? I mean, I think the market going to be affected at all, and just the industry in general. And you know, before you get going on that, it's very interesting to hear everyone's opinion on it, because I feel like I get very informed opinions with the people that maybe I follow on social media that are you know, in real estate, and people that I look to for advice, and I really value their opinion. And then I see you know, kind of mainstream media's opinion on it, which in my opinion couldn't be further from the truth. But that is, the public doesn't follow the people I follow that are in real estate, and people's opinion that I feel like should be getting out to the world. They see the news, right? They see this anchor who's been giving, you know, a prompt to read, and they're giving
a lower co-op fee? Or can you do an analysis on a home that's offering a lower co-op fee? Does it spend more time on market? Does it get less than asking price? How are those homes selling? And I think that would further the antitrust regulations by proving the fact that those take longer to sell.
Yeah.
And so I'm not doing that. But plus, they've also taken the ability for away from me to extract that information from the MLS. And so I can't even see what's happening with commissions right now. So I don't know what's happened with commissions. Anecdotally, and speaking with agents, when I'm talking to them, I've heard them say, I saw one that was at a lower commission than what I've seen in the past, or I've seen some that are at significantly lower commissions than in the past. And so the reality of it is that commissions have always been negotiable, and we're way ahead of the curve here in Colorado, where we already have buyer's agency, where this is a discussion that's done up front before you go out and show properties to your clients so that they understand who pays for the commission.
Yeah.
So in Colorado, I don't think it's going to change very much, but there are other states across the United States where buyer's agency doesn't exist. And now this is a whole new commission construction. This is a whole new commission conversation that they're having with them about having to pay. My big concern is that first-time home buyer that doesn't have a ton of money. They've saved up for an FHA or a VA, and I believe that FHA has come around and said that if they ask for a concession for closing costs to pay the to pay the buyer's agent, that won't count towards their 3% concession. So I've heard that. Don't quote me on that, though. I'm not a lender. But I have heard that VA may follow suit along with that.
I believe that is true, and they've made that announcement.
Okay, yeah. That's great. And so what happens with conventional and jumbos after that, we'll see. But I really do think that if that hadn't come into effect, that it's that first-time home buyer that would really be impacted by that can only put down 3% on a home and doesn't have that money left over to pay their agent. Yeah. And so I'm glad that happened, and I'm sure that the lenders are likely to come up with something in order to wrap that cost into the closing costs so that the buyer is still able to get into the home. It just now becomes a negotiated portion of the contract. And so I think it's really going to be business as usual for the most part. I don't see this going into a place where a buyer goes unrepresented and just directly to the listing agent, because if you think about it, the listing agent's job is the duty is their their fiduciary responsibility is to the seller and to get the best price for the seller. Buyers still need representation and help through all of that documentation and paperwork, inspection, objection, appraisal. There's so much work that goes into being a buyer's agent that the buyers might not necessarily see, but they would not be well positioned if they try to represent themselves on that.
Yeah, I mean, there's a reason they created buyer's agents in the first place, right?
Yeah.
Because listing agents, double ending deals, got in a lot of trouble.
Yeah.
And so they figured out, well, wait, buyers need representation. And that's how this all got started. You know? And I definitely think buyer agents have a huge value.
Yes.
I mean, we're never taught how to buy a house, and if you go straight to the listing agent, and that listing agent has to treat you as a customer in Colorado, if they're representing the seller, I mean, for lack of a better word, you have nothing to protect you from getting screwed.
Yeah.
And that's what's going to happen if you don't have an agent in your corner who does this every day, who knows what they're doing, a good agent, right? I heard Ryan Serhant put it this way, good service is expensive. Bad service will cost you a fortune.
Yeah, and that's great.
And I think a lot of buyer's agents are probably going to use that in their buyer's presentation moving forward. But I also think that, the seller paying buyer's agent commissions, it probably is not going to change for the most part. And I heard it put like this the other day that, a seller wants to sell and get as many offers as possible and get as much money as possible. Well, if you are not going to pay a buyer's agent commission, and most buyers can't pay the buyer's agent commission, then now you've gotten less offers on your property than you would have. And most likely you're going to get less for your property than you would have, even if when it all said and done, is you are paying that buyer's agent commission.
Well, regardless of what the buyer's agent's commission is, what if the buyer doesn't want to look at homes where a buyer's agent's commission isn't being offered?
Right.
And if they have to come up with that money out of pocket and they simply don't have it, they're simply not going to look at those homes.
Right. And I would say that's a large part. I mean, you probably have more of the numbers than I do, or we'll maybe that becomes important to know those numbers in the future. But I would say that you've now, cut your market share down sizably for the amount of interest you would get on your property if you're not offering that commission. So at the end of the day, it's funny when all this started being announced. I mean, I saw people leave the industry immediately. I saw a lot of people get very, very scared. And that's what's been very surprising to me, because if you really break it down, I mean, nothing has changed when it comes to how you're running your business.
Not in Colorado.
It's like, I mean, your commission's always been negotiable. If you're having the right conversation in the beginning, like, really nothing should change.
There shouldn't be any surprises here.
Right, which is funny. Cool. Well, thank you for shining some light on that. I would say you're probably more informed about it than I am, honestly. That was great. So maybe last question here. What keeps you going? What do you love about what you do? Because as an agent, as someone who's been in the industry, a little while, and I think I've used your data and insight since I've been doing this, and seen it as a huge tool in my business. And I use First American for all my listings and all my closings.
Thank you.
Shout out Lindsay.
Woohoo! She
is best closer I've ever worked with, and even on my buy sides, right, I'm calling her all the time.
Yeah, she's great.
She is amazing. And so what keeps you doing this?
It's great. I'm really fortunate to have fallen into such a great industry, not knowing what title insurance was when I first started in my late 20s. That it has just been, it's great, and it's wacky, and it keeps you on your toes. And I like that there are constant problems being thrown at you to solve, and to sweep in and be the hero and to have the answer and to fix the problems really keeps me going. And so it gives me the ability to earn a high level of expertise, and to provide that value to my clients, and to know that I'm creating this wonderful world for my kids where they get to do amazing things, best education I can get them, best everything. And so it's so rewarding to be able to do that for my kids, to not have to let them see struggle. Yeah, they're pretty special little guys. Awesome. And one thing that I want to touch on too, you said in the very beginning, you wanted to do a commission-based sales role because you knew you would work harder than anyone else. And that was a long time ago, right? And I would say it's very evident that you do work harder than everyone else. And there's 19,000 people in the real estate industry that rely on you. Right. And if you stopped doing what you were doing, like, there would be a major hole in my world. Right. I mean, I have your reports as a saved tab and just always open on my computer. So yeah, thank you. Thank you.
From the real estate world, thank you for what you do, and also thank you for coming on our podcast. If people want to get in touch with you, how would they do that?
So best way, give me a call, 720-229-6641, or email maller, ALLER, at first, FIRSTAM as in Mary.com. And so I will tell you, I get a lot of inboxes for Facebook. I miss those all the time. So I try really hard to stay up on those, but give me a phone call or a text message or an email, and I will get right back to you.
Cool. Well, thank you guys so much for watching. We'll see you on the next podcast here soon. Peace.